Welcome to this slideshow, X-ray therapy, the German Emperor and World War I. This historical photo shows Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen with one of his tubes who is lost in thought. Radiation therapy was born just 3 months after the discovery of X-rays in the age of imperialism, which culminated fatally in World War I. I would like to investigate the rather curious question of whether X-rays could have helped to prevent this war. Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen took over the chair of the Physical Institute at the University of Würzburg in 1888, housed in the building shown here, which had just been newly constructed. In 1895, he discovered the X-rays, for which he received the first Nobel Prize in Physics in 1901. A historical photo from his laboratory with an experimental setup from that time enables us to imagine the conditions he had for his groundbreaking experiment. At this time, Germany was one of the leading nations in the world in science. Less than 20 years after its discovery, Germany and all of Europe sank to rubble and ashes during World War I. The photo shows German soldiers with a machine gun and gas masks. World War I is often seen as the great catastrophe of the 20th century. But what does this have to do with the use of radiation against cancer? I will try to bring that closer to you in this short video, and I will have to go back a little further in the story. World War I is assumed to be a direct consequence of the reign of Emperor William II. Here he is on the balcony of the Berlin City Palace on August 1, 1914. Incidentally, he was the grandson of Queen Victoria. William II was undiplomatic, but at the same time fascinated by the army, especially the navy. He was an advocate of colonial politics and the demonstration of power. He dreamed that Germany should become a world power. The expansion of the ports of Kiel and Wilhelmshaven, as well as the inauguration of the Kiel Canal linking the North Sea with the Baltic Sea in 1895, reflect William II's focus on the navy. This was the same year that Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen discovered X-rays in Würzburg. On the right is the most famous early X-ray picture. This photo of the city of Würzburg was taken by Röntgen himself, probably during his early days there in 1888. In the same year, 1888, on June 15th, William II, in the right picture, had succeeded his father, Frederick III, shown in the middle panel, the so-called 99 Days Emperor, to the throne. Indeed, Frederick III was the bearer of hope for the liberal movement in Germany, and the contemporary philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche described this untimely death on June 15th, 1888 as a serious tragedy for Germany. What caused his death? In March 1887, a 2 by 4 mm large nodule on the left vocal cord was identified as the cause of Frederick III's hoarseness, which had existed since the turn of the year. As it turned out later, it was larynx cancer in its earliest stage, now categorized as a T1 tumor. Despite more than a dozen of sessions of electrocautery, the tumor had grown back in May 1887. The German doctors von Bergmann and Gerhardt therefore recommended a splitting operation of the larynx in order to have access to remove his suspicious area. However, at the request of Frederick's wife Vicky, Queen Victoria's daughter, a larynx specialist from London should first be called in, Dr. Morel Mackenzie, shown on the right. However, but the correct diagnosis could not be made despite repeated biopsies as depicted by drawings of the findings over time by Dr. Landgraf. At the beginning of November 1887, a committee of experts, an early form of a tumor board, came to the conclusion that it had to be cancer of the larynx due to a significant enlargement of the tumor. Crown Prince Frederick III could not be saved. In early February 1888, a tracheotomy was necessary due to attacks of suffocation. Nevertheless, he succeeded his father William I on the throne on March 9, 1888. Only 99 days later, on June 15, 1888, he died in the New Palace of Potsdam from a locally advanced laryngeal carcinoma, which would nowadays be classified as tumor stage T4N1, according to the autopsy report of the pathologist Rudolf Virchow. Organ-sparing radiotherapy could have saved Frederick III's voice and his life at the same time in spring 1887 at stage T1. The saying, "Those who are late will be punished by life itself," comes to mind in this context. How late were the early pioneers of head and neck cancer radiation therapy? After Röntgen discovered X-rays in early November 1895, it took only a quarter of a year for Dr. Voigt to carry out the first historically documented radiotherapy for a head and neck cancer tumor in Hamburg. Assuming this date, the radiation oncologists were only 9 years late after the diagnosis of the small nodule on the emperor's left vocal cord. The right picture shows the tubes used at that time. Two forms of radiation were technically refined very quickly. On the one hand using X-rays and on the other hand using radioactive sources after Becquerel's discovery of radioactivity on March 1st, 1896. Almost exactly 9 years to the day after the nodule at the emperor's vocal cord had been discovered. Becquerel himself is shown on the right side in his stab. The panel in the top left-hand corner shows the first plate marked by radioactive rays. It was placed accidentally under some uranyl potassium sulfate, and Becquerel realized that uranium emitted radiation of then unknown nature. Below is a photographic print and a sketch prepared by him to describe the experiment that led him to the discovery of radioactivity. In 1895, Röntgen used such tubes to generate the rays. The energy of only 50 to 100 kilovolts from these tubes initially led to severe skin reactions. In 1901, Dr. Dobson from London was able to use better self-regulating tubes. He was the first to explicitly treat laryngeal cancer with X-rays. However, the use of radioactive sources for Curie therapy or brachytherapy was the essential step towards improving the tolerability of radiotherapy. This picture from 1904 shows one of the first applicators for the treatment of ENT tumors with radium. In 1903, both Mackenzie in England and Delzot in Belgium treated patients with laryngeal cancer with radium sources. Delzot used such clearly refined applicators for carrying out brachytherapy for laryngeal cancer. Compared to X-ray therapy, the dosimetry with radioactive sources was much more reliable. Therefore, The method developed rapidly until the outbreak of World War I. Before 1914, fenestration of the larynx cartilage had been developed as part of an operation that made it possible to bring the radioactive emitters particularly close to the tumors and to significantly reduce the side effects. The left panel shows the implantation of radium needles into a tongue tumor. On the right, you can see brachytherapy of the vocal cord in 1914 in a soprano singer. She had lost her voice for 3 years and was cured 3 months after treatment. Her voice had returned, and on later examinations, any trace of a lump had disappeared. This diagram of the pioneering development of radiotherapy shows us how rapidly the development of 2 types of radiotherapy advanced after the discovery of X-rays and radioactivity. On the one hand was teletherapy with ever better tubes. On the other hand, radium therapy, primarily as brachytherapy in tissue, in body cavities, or as contact therapy on the surface of skin. Curative radiotherapy with today's modern technical means further improved, and patients often have a good quality of life thereafter. The historical example of the missed opportunity to treat Frederick III demonstrates how precious a life that is saved by radiation oncologists could be. A prominent example for this is Michael Douglas, an Oscar and Golden Globe awardee. In 2010, he had a locally advanced cancer of the tongue and was cured by simultaneous chemoradiotherapy in an organ-sparing approach. He was able to act in 14 movies after his treatment, and he won 2 Golden Globes in 2014 and in 2019, demonstrating how successful the treatment was. With that, I would like to conclude and thank you very much for your attention.